what they like in the Tudor court is to tie animals together. So you'll have a chicken tied to a pig, or a chicken riding a pig. That is meant to be very hilarious. Or you have the sort of equivalent of a sort of mille feu of meat put all together. Hello, I'm Kate Williams, and today we're going to be talking about Hampton Court, and we're going to be asking, could you cut it as one of Henry VIII's courtiers in the snake pit of the Tudor court? If Hever Castle is one of Henry's smaller castles, Hampton Court is his big one. It's his giant whale of a castle. And Hampton Court is beloved by Henry because even though he's got about 70 palaces, 70 castles, some of them taken from his friends, some of them taken from, well, his wife he chopped their head off, and some of them taken from the monasteries, most of them are too small for his needs because Henry VIII has a giant court. And this is what we're going to try and work out if we could cut it there. About 700 to 1,000 people, you can't get them into Hever Castle, but you can get them into Hampton Court. It's All Saints' Day, November the 1st, 1541. Henry VIII is praying in the Chapel Royal of Hampton Court, very pious as he is. And then a letter is brought to him. It's so urgent, the king has to be interrupted while praying. Henry reads the letter. He's in shock. Oh no, I didn't know any of this. It's all a big show to pretend that Henry is entirely the victim, had no idea what was going on. And it's the evidence that Catherine Howard, wife number 5, who is a good 30 years his junior, she's maybe around 17 to 20, she's very young, that she has committed adultery against the poor king. Poor Catherine is taken to be interrogated, and this is real interrogation, because it's treason to commit adultery to the king, and she knows what the consequences are. Well, her cousin was Anne Boleyn, and Anne Boleyn, it was adultery, and off with Anne's head. So Catherine is terrified, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, who interviews her, says, I found her in such lamentation and heaviness as I never saw no creature, so that it would have pitied any man's heart to look upon her. You might feel sorry for her, but Catherine's fate is set. She is going to be executed. She's taken to the Tower, and her head is chopped off. Henry now has executed 2 wives, and he's now looking for number 6. Hampton Court is one of Henry's favourites. He loves Hampton Court. He uses it very frequently because of its size. And where does it come from? Well, we've been here before, and that is, don't have a house bigger than the king's. Thomas Wolsey rules Hampton Court. He wants a big cardinal's palace. It's along Renaissance lines. When he realises he's falling out of favour, he says to Henry, take my palace, as a sort of happy bribe. But Henry takes it, and still, Thomas Wolsey is going to be falling out of favour. Fortunately, Wolsey dies on the way to London where he'll be tried, so he escapes, but having his head chopped off. And Henry takes Wolsey's palace, and he loves it due to the size. But he also has to do a lot of renovations straight away, particularly to the kitchens. Henry needs to create giant kitchens because his court of 1,000 people need a lot of meals. It's meals at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and essentially the kitchens need to produce 1,600 meals a day. So it's busy work, and that's not apart from the king's food, which is created by another kitchen. So what was life like at Hampton Court? This beautiful palace that was built by Wolsey, extended by Henry VIII. Henry VIII has his giant great hall with a minstrel's gallery. He has his royal apartments. This is a beautiful and luxurious palace. But what's it like to live there? So to be a courtier, it's tough if you're a woman. You need to kind of make sure that Henry doesn't spot you and decide he wants you as a mistress, because either you do it or your head gets chopped off. Generally, Henry VIII likes ladies who are on the fair blonde side. Anne Boleyn had dark eyes, but we think fair hair. And he also liked ladies who are good at dancing in court shows. So my advice, if you don't want to be Henry VIII's mistress, is to go flat on your face falling in the middle of a court show, in a court masque. Just when you're supposed to be playing Beauty or Mercy or something, just trip over your skirts. That's my tip. So as a courtier, you have got to wear very stiff, formal outfits. Don't do sit-ups, you'll essentially explode your kidneys. And you also need to really be in this etiquette of society, the etiquette of life. And most of all, you need to be really good at eating, because Henry VIII's meals are gigantic. Huge meals at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and you have to eat very well. But don't eat everything, because you must leave some leftovers, otherwise that's seen as rude. And to eat in the Tudor court, it's all about meat. You need to love meat, because vegetables are for poor people, and salads are very mistrusted. If you have a salad, it will be heated up. And this is actually a disaster, because a few years later, when Lady Jane Grey gets married to Guildford Dudley in the giant Tudor wedding of the year, they do hand out a hot salad. But unfortunately, this gives nearly the entirety of the guests a massive dose of food poisoning. People are ill for weeks afterwards. You can be ill at any time. Poor old Margaret Beaufort, the mother of Henry VII, eats a bad swan at one of the coronation banquets, and that's the end of her. So you need to be quite careful what you're eating. But you need to love meat. Nothing but meat. Eat it all down. And there's a lot of meat. There's a lot of eating. This is a high-protein diet. In just 1 year in Elizabeth I's court, where they are not as food-obsessed as Henry VIII, they eat 8,200 sheep, 2,330 deer, 1,870 pigs, 1,240 oxen, 760 calves, along with wild boar, and also they eat fish at other times, and various birds, including peacocks. Yum. And what they like in the Tudor court is to tie animals together. So you'll have a chicken tied to a pig, or a chicken riding a pig. That is meant to be very hilarious. Or you have the sort of equivalent of a sort of millefeuille of meat put all together. You get a duck and put it in a pig and roast it. Or you get a dolphin and put that inside another animal and roast it. Or 3 animals. As we all know, different meats take different cooking times. So there was no guarantee that the meat you were eating was at all cooked. In fact, generally 1 bit of your meat was going to be raw. So being in Henry VIII's court is pretty tough. You have to eat a lot of meat and not complain about stomachache the whole time. You have to jollily eat peacock and porpoise and everything that's put in front of you. You have to wear these very stiff, tight clothes, and you are surrounded by a king who will chop your head off if you annoy him. There are all kinds of treacherous ways to live and die in the Tudor court. But one thing that gave you a bit of help was the wonderful astronomical clock in the gatehouse in Hampton Court that we can still see today, that was installed in the 1540s. And this clock is like the Apple Watch of the 16th century, because it has every type of information that you need to proceed as a Tudor courtier. The astronomical clock gives you the hour, the month, the day, it gives you the zodiac signs, it gives you the number of days since the beginning of the year, it gives you the phases of the moon, the days since the new moon, and this is very important, it gives you the time of the high water at London Bridge, because most people got to the court on barges, and if the water gets too high, it's too dangerous to go under London Bridge. I mean, only the very best boatmen can negotiate it, and it's not a good idea. It needs to be low. And that is really crucial to know when the high water is, because if you miss the boat and miss a court occasion, you are going to be in some 16th century trouble. And these tides give rise, a few years later, to Elizabeth I's famous tide letter. Now, Elizabeth I, then Princess Elizabeth, is in trouble with her half-sister, Mary I. Mary I thinks Elizabeth is wrapped up in some of the plots to get Mary off the throne. And Mary calls Elizabeth to be interrogated at the Tower. And we know what that means. The Tower is like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. You don't want to go there. So when Elizabeth hears that Mary wants her to go to the Tower, she starts to write her a letter. And she spends so long writing this letter that by the time that she's finished the letter, she works on all the bits of the paper. By the time she's finished the letter the tide is too high for her to go. So she's beaten the tide. She had the astronomical clock in her head. She beat the tide. It's too late. I mean, she has to go anyway, but still, she staved off Mary's initial anger. I always think it's a bit like, you know, when someone sends you an email and they're really angry, and you think, if I reply now, they'll just be angry. Maybe if I leave in an hour or two, they might be less angry. This is what Elizabeth I was doing with her astronomical clock knowledge. So Henry loves Hampton Court. It's one of his favourite palaces. He puts in the Great Hall. He puts in the wonderful real tennis court that you can still use today. But his palace doesn't last forever. It really starts falling into some disrepair. Charles I is imprisoned there. It's where he's put in prison and when he's on his way to be executed. And then when William and Mary come to the throne, they see this rather down-at-heel palace and they think, let's totally rebuild it. Let's rebuild this palace to look like Versailles, which of course then was the fashionable palace at the time. So they're going to rebuild the whole thing to look like Versailles. And this really does tie into a point about palace history. It's that palaces are destroyed by fire, like Whitehall. They can be lost. But the biggest palace vandals that we've got are royals themselves. They come along and they get on the throne and they say, that palace, I don't like it. I'm knocking it all down. So William tries to knock down all of Hampton Court. And in the end, he runs out of ideas. He gets bored of the project and he really runs out of money. So fortunately, we still do have some of the court. We have the Great Hall, the tennis courts. We have Henry's kitchens. But we don't have everything. We've lost his private apartments, many of the rooms in which the real drama of Tudor life was lost, all thanks to William IV wanting to build the Great Palace of Versailles. After William IV in the 18th century, it wasn't really very much used. And then in the 19th century, in the reign of Queen Victoria, it was opened to tourists. And tourists flocked to Hampton Court. It became a huge Victorian tourist site. They absolutely loved it. And I love the Hever Castle, Hampton Court, and I think they show us so much about the 16th century. If Hever Castle is one of our smallest castles, then Hampton Court is really one of our big ones. And there you see Henry, as he wants to be known. Big, rich, lavish, sporting, glamorous, and ruthless.